Welcome back, y'all. Today I'm gonna be reacting to another cave exploration video. When I tell you I love these videos and they make me uncomfortable at the same time, this one caught my eye because this man is like in a hexagon shape in the thumbnail. Like, it gets to a point. Like, give up. You gotta give up at a point. Y'all just keep digging and then y'all be buried. Anyway, so we're gonna get right into it. I don't even want to do a long intro.
Today we will be looking at two horrifying caving stories that went horribly wrong. The first one takes us to a painful hexagonal passage that is beyond human endurance, while the second story is even more terrifying as the explorers enter a cave in the worst possible time of the year. As always, viewer discretion is advised.
It's always the worst.
Cool Caves isn't really a cave at all. It's an abandoned mine located in Mardick Township, Pennsylvania. The name is misleading, drawing curious hikers and amateur explorers who think they're entering a natural cave system. But abandoned mines present their own unique dangers. Unlike caves formed by natural water flow over millions of years, mines were carved by humans for specific purposes, often with little regard for long-term stability or safe passage. On June 11th, 3 young men, ages 18 to 20, were out hiking in the area when they discovered the entrance to Cool Caves. The entrance itself was intimidating. A keyhole-shaped opening in the required visitors to squeeze through a narrow slot before dropping into the larger mine passage beyond. The keyhole design meant crawling on hands and knees through a tight horizontal opening, then sliding down into the vertical portion that opened into the main tunnel. The keyhole entrance served as both a barrier and a warning. Anyone who couldn't fit through it had no business being in the mine. But for the 3 friends, all young and reasonably fit, it seemed like an interesting challenge rather than a serious obstacle. They took turns navigating the keyhole entrance. The first friend squeezed through the narrow horizontal section, then dropped down into the main passage. The second friend, who was the largest of the 3, had to work harder to compress his shoulders and chest to fit through the tight opening, but he managed to make it through. The third friend followed without much difficulty. Once past the entrance, the main tunnel opened up considerably. The carved stone walls showed the marks of mining equipment, and the passage was large enough for them to walk in a slight crouch. It felt like they had overcome the major obstacle. The tight entrance was behind them, and now they could explore the mine system more comfortably. They arranged themselves in single file and began moving deeper into the abandoned mine. For about 150 feet, 46 meters, they made good progress through the mine. The passage twisted and turned, following the path that miners had carved decades earlier. It was midway through their exploration that they encountered the real danger of Cool Caves, a section where the passage suddenly constricted into a hexagonal shape. This wasn't a gradual narrowing like they might find in a natural cave. Instead, it was an abrupt geometric constriction where the tunnel walls formed 6 distinct sides, creating sharp angles. From the outside, it looked manageable, just another obstacle in their underground adventure. But the geometric shape created deceptive challenges that weren't immediately obvious. The first friend entered the hexagonal section without too much trouble. He had to squeeze and contort his body to fit through the angular opening, but he was the smallest of the 3 and managed to work his way through to the other side. From there, he called back that it was tight but passable. The second friend, being the largest, approached the hexagonal constriction with more caution. The 6-sided shape meant that pressure points hit his body at unusual angles. Not just the typical squeeze of shoulders and hips, but irregular stress on his ribs, chest, and back, where the geometric walls created sharp contact points. He worked his way into the hexagonal passage, twisting and compressing his body to navigate the angular walls. For the first part of the constriction, he made progress, though it was uncomfortable and required careful positioning to avoid getting caught on the sharp stone edges. But halfway through, disaster struck. The second friend became completely wedged in the passage. His chest area, the widest part of his torso, became locked between the unforgiving stone walls. The hexagonal shape created multiple pressure points that pinched and held him fast. He couldn't move forward because the passage seemed to narrow slightly ahead. He couldn't move backward because the angular walls had caught on his ribs and clothing. The first friend, who had already made it through to the other side, quickly realized something was wrong when the group stopped moving and he heard sounds of distress. He tried to crawl back toward his trapped friend, but the passage was so narrow that there was no room for both of them. The real problem became apparent when the first friend attempted to squeeze back into the hexagonal section to help. With the second friend
Crazy
wedged in
work.
place, his body completely filled the geometric cross-section of the passage. There was no space
gotta
to
go the
maneuver
way you
around
came
him,
in. He
no
gonna-
way to get leverage to help pull him free, and no room for the first friend to position himself to provide assistance. The trapped caver was beginning to panic. His breathing became rapid and shallow, which only made the tight space feel more suffocating. The psychological pressure of being trapped underground, combined with the physical constriction
That's such
and
a
the
stupid
knowledge that he was
position, too.
blocking his friend's escape route, was overwhelming. The first friend, now effectively trapped on the far side, could do little but try to keep his companion calm while they figured out what to do. The narrow passage meant he couldn't reach his friend to provide direct help, and he couldn't squeeze back through the constriction to find an alternative escape route. Fortunately, the third friend was still in the main tunnel, behind the hexagonal section, and could move freely. Realizing that the situation was beyond what they could handle themselves, he made the critical decision to leave his friends and go for help. He crawled back through the mine passage, squeezed through the keyhole entrance, and immediately called emergency services. When they arrived at Cool Caves and assessed the situation, they found two young men trapped deep in the mine, one wedged solid in a hexagonal passage and the other trapped beyond the constriction with no way out. Dozens of firefighters and rescue workers were called to the scene. The hexagonal shape of the passage created unique challenges they rarely encountered in typical cave rescues. The rescue team had to navigate the keyhole entrance themselves, bringing equipment through the tight opening and into the mine tunnel. Once inside, they had to crawl 150 feet to reach the trapped men, working in cramped conditions with limited space to maneuver. After evaluating their options, the rescue team decided on an unconventional approach. They brought in soap and water to create lubrication around the trapped friend's torso. The idea was to reduce friction between his body and the hexagonal stone walls, allowing him to compress slightly and slide backward through the constriction. The process was slow and methodical. Rescue workers had to work in the cramped hexagonal passage, applying soap and water around the trapped man's chest and ribs. The geometric walls made it difficult to get the lubricant where it was needed most, and they had to work carefully to avoid injuring the already distressed victim. For 2 agonizing hours, the rescue operation continued. The trapped cover remained wedged in the hexagonal passage while dozens of emergency responders worked to free him. The psychological pressure was intense. The first of the group, trapped on the far side of the constriction, could do nothing but wait and try to provide moral support. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the soap and water technique began to work. The lubrication reduced the friction enough for the
And then
trapped
just to
caver to
help him,
compress
you
his
gotta get
chest
in a
slightly
crazy
and begin to
position.
work
This
his
is-
way backward through the hexagonal constriction. Inch by painful inch, he slid back through the
Right.
geometric passage that had held him prisoner. When he finally popped free from the section, the relief was overwhelming, but the ordeal wasn't over. Both young men still had to crawl 150 feet back through the mine tunnel, squeeze through the keyhole entrance, and reach safety on the surface. When they finally emerged from Cool Caves after their 2-hour underground ordeal, the second friend was treated for minor injuries, scrapes and bruises from the rough stone walls and the extraction process. All 3 young men were shaken, but grateful that their casual exploration hadn't ended in tragedy. Later, they found out that the passage was never meant for a human. This hexagon passage used to be used to move
Well, at
equipment
least
or
they lived.
objects using a pulley or conveyor belt
That would've
system.
been a stupid
They were
way to
lucky
die.
enough to get out of it alive. This next story takes us to a cave that turns deadly in a particular time of the year. Knowing the fact, spelunkers still opted to take on this deadly dare. Alachua Sink
hate the
sits in
underwater
Alachua
ones.
County, Florida, part of the state's extensive network of freshwater cave systems. Even under perfect conditions, this is considered an advanced cave dive, the kind of site that demands experience, proper training, and planning. The sink connects to a complex underwater cave system with multiple tunnels, chambers, and potential dead ends. It's not a place for casual exploration or cutting corners on safety. But July in Florida brings challenges that make even advanced sites nearly impossible to dive safely. The summer heat creates perfect conditions for massive algae blooms in freshwater systems. These blooms turn cave water into a murky green, reducing visibility to mere inches in some cases. Any experienced cave diver knows that when algae blooms hit, you postpone the dive.
Oof.
Period. The two divers who arrived at Alachua Sink in the July of 1992 should have taken one look at the water conditions and turned around.
They
The
still
water
went.
looked like green paint, so thick with algae that their dive lights would barely penetrate a foot ahead. But they had driven hours to get there. They had planned this dive,
Why would
prepared
you
their
dive in?
equipment, and were eager to explore the cave system. Instead of making the
Alright,
smart
bro.
decision to abort the dive, they decided to push forward despite the dangerous conditions. The two divers entered the water
I don't
and began their
understand.
descent into the murky depths of Alachua Sink. Their lights barely penetrated the algae-thick
Nigga, the
water.
water is green.
What should have been a
like,
relatively straightforward entry to the main cave tunnel became a nightmare of confusion and disorientation. They couldn't see more than inches ahead, feeling their way along the limestone walls and searching for the main guideline. Cave diving under perfect conditions requires constant visual contact with a guideline, a rope system that leads from the cave entrance back to safety. The line is literally your lifeline, the only way to navigate back through the maze of underwater passages. Losing contact with that line in a cave system is often fatal. In zero visibility conditions, maintaining contact becomes even more critical. They realized something was
and
wrong.
then they be going
The
on these
passage they were
long-ass
following didn't
missions
feel
with
right. The dimensions
limited
were off.
oxygen.
The direction seemed incorrect. In the green murk, they had missed the entrance to the main tunnel entirely and had wandered into a side passage or false lead.
Yeah, I bet they did.
Recognizing their mistake, they made the decision to turn around and head back to the surface. It should have been a simple procedure: follow their path back to the entrance and abort the dive. But in zero visibility conditions, even simple procedures can become deadly complications. One of them, let's call him the buddy, was following behind his partner as they began their exit. The thick algae bloom made it impossible to maintain visual contact, even at close range. He could occasionally make out the faint glow of his partner's light ahead of him, but the silhouette would disappear and reappear in the murky water like a ghost. As they made their way back toward the entrance, the buddy noticed his partner's light ahead of him,
That is so
apparently
scary.
heading out along what they hoped was the correct guideline. Everything seemed to be going according to plan. His partner appeared to be following the line back to safety, and he was following close behind. But cave diving has a cruel way of punishing even small mistakes. In the zero visibility conditions, with both divers focused on finding their way out, a critical error occurred. Somehow, without either diver realizing it, they had become separated. Whether his partner had taken a wrong turn, followed a false line, or simply moved too far ahead in the murky water, the buddy couldn't say. One moment his partner's light was visible ahead, the next it was gone. Following standard cave diving procedure, the buddy continued his own exit. Assuming his partner was somewhere ahead of him on the line, he began reeling up the guideline as he went, a normal practice to clean up after the dive. The line wound onto his reel as he made his way back through the murky passages toward the surface. When he finally broke the surface at Alachua Sink, gasping in the Florida heat and pulling off his mask,
Okay.
he expected to see his partner already there, waiting for him. The surface area was small enough that anyone who had exited would be clearly visible. But his partner wasn't there. The surface was empty
You can't
except for
feel
him.
yourself swimming like down though.
A cold dread settled in
Instead
his
of-
stomach as he treaded
Is that a
water
dumb
and
question?
looked
But I
around.
feel like
Where was his buddy? He had seen his light on the line, heading out ahead of him. He should have reached the surface first, but there was no sign of him anywhere. The buddy called out, hoping his partner had exited at a different spot or was somewhere nearby on the surface. No response came back. The only sounds were the gentle lapping of water and the buzz of insects in the Florida heat. Realizing something was seriously wrong, the buddy immediately began conducting line searches. He re-entered the cave system multiple times, following different possible routes his partner
oh,
might have
don't
taken.
re-enter.
Each search took him back into that green murk, feeling his way through passages and hoping to find some trace of the missing diver. But the algae bloom that had made the dive dangerous in the first place now made search efforts nearly impossible. He couldn't see
I
anything
don't
in
know
the
if I
thick,
would go
soupy
back
water.
down for that.
His lights
Oh,
were
I know
useless
for sure I
beyond a
would
few
die.
inches.
I'll
He
call
could
the
feel
authorities.
along the cave walls and follow guidelines, but actually locating someone in that underwater maze was like searching for a needle in a haystack while blindfolded. After several increasingly desperate search attempts, the buddy realized he needed help immediately. He surfaced and made the call that every diver dreads having to make, calling for emergency rescue services because his partner was missing in a cave system. Rescue divers arrived quickly, knowing that time was critical. In cave diving accidents, the first few hours are crucial. If the missing diver was still alive and had found an air pocket, they might still have breathing gas remaining. Every minute that passed reduced the chances of a successful rescue. The rescue team was composed of highly experienced cave divers who knew Alachua's sink well. But even they were shocked by the conditions they encountered. They later reported it as the worst visibility they had ever seen at the site. The algae bloom was so thick that their powerful dive lights were virtually useless. The search became a slow, methodical process of feeling their way through every possible passage and tunnel. They followed every guideline, checked every side tunnel, and explored every chamber they could find. The cave system was more complex than many people realized, with multiple levels and interconnecting passages that could easily confuse a disoriented diver. Desperate to improve visibility and aid in the search, the rescue team even tried pumping fresh water into the cave system, hoping to dilute the algae-thick water enough to see something. The effort was futile. The algae bloom was too dense and widespread to be affected by the additional fresh water. For 3 agonizing days, the search continued. Rescue divers worked in shifts, exploring every accessible part of the cave system. Family members gathered at the surface, hoping for news. The diving community watched and waited, knowing that this tragedy could happen to any of them under the wrong circumstances. Finally, on the 3rd day, the search teams found what they had been dreading. Deep in the cave system, in a passage that was easily missed in the poor visibility conditions, they discovered the missing diver's body. He had apparently become lost in the maze-like tunnels, possibly following what he thought was the guideline. But
why do people do this? Like, how is this fun? I don't understand. Especially the underwater ones. Like, the regular caves is one thing. If that's your thing, that's your thing. Dirt, I guess, go off. But underwater with limited oxygen and like it's shit in the water that you don't. I don't get it. Rest in peace, but like, damn. Terrible decision to make. And the guy that went back in, he a real one. I would have just called somebody. Like, the water is green. Like, what makes you? I'll see y'all next week.
Instead I found tomorrow, and I put that shit right back, man. I'll see what I find tomorrow.